Hello, everyone. I'm Eric D'Souza, and we're continuing our series of interviewing the Crime Writers of Canada members who have been shortlisted for an awards of excellence. It's my pleasure today to be introducing Anthony Bidulka, which I hope you all know, but I think this is the first time him and I got to chat. So how are you today, Anthony?
I'm really well, thanks. How are you?
I'm good too. So the Crime Writers Award of Excellence, actually, I wanted to ask this. I should have asked this before we started rolling. This is not the first time you've been nominated, has it?
No, I've been shortlisted before.
All right. Fingers crossed that it'll be more than shortlisted this time, but you are nominated for Best Crime Novel sponsored by Rakuten Kobo.
Yes.
A little bit about Anthony. In 1999, Anthony Bidulka left a professional accounting career to pursue writing and never looked back. Anthony's books have been nominated for a Saskatchewan Book Awards, a ReLit Award, and the Lambda Literary Award for Best Men's Mystery, making Anthony the first Canadian to win in that category. More than just a writer, Anthony has won numerous awards for his volunteer and philanthropic efforts in his community. And we'll talk a bit about that later, but I just learned today that they've named parks after him, which is just amazing, Anthony. Actually, let's start with the book because that's what you're nominated for. So Going to Beautiful. You say in the book that Beautiful is a tiny farming community so small it's not on the map, but I had to find out if it was true or not, and I couldn't find it. So is it a true place?
It is based on a true place. There isn't a town in Saskatchewan named Beautiful. It really, though, is based on the town where I grew up, which is a little town called Prudhomme. And a lot of the characters that I inhabit the town with are people that I know. And, as people have read the book over the past year since it's been out, so many people have come up to me and they say, like, I know who that person is, or I know this place. And it's not that they know the specific place or person, but they can feel it. It's a very Saskatchewan town. And I think for me, naming it Beautiful had, just some other meanings to it as well.
Yeah, speaking of the characters, there's so many brilliant ones. Is there a real life Chung? The store owner of
Yes, absolutely. Okay. Yeah. And the octogenarian nun, there certainly is a character like that. I think she actually taught me grade 1 or 2 way back when.
While I was looking though, like Saskatchewan's got some interesting cities. They say it's pronounced for J, but it's spelt forget. and you have a city named Elbow.
Yes, and of course Moose Jaw. You can't forget about Moose Jaw.
Yeah, everyone knows that one.
There's some good ones.
My friend Robert Rotenberg often speaks of the importance of a strong first paragraph. Your first paragraph is 6 words. Life was good until it wasn't. It's sort of a theme of the book, and you repeat that phrase a few times. But at what point in your creative process were you like, that's what's going to start the book?
Yeah. Well, Eric, most of this book is written during the pandemic. And I had this real sense of of creativeness sort of coming up in me, but I knew for certain that I didn't want to write about the pandemic. I expect that many writers will or have and will do a great job of it. But I wanted to write about the sense of loss that I was sensing out there in the world, a real collective loss. And we all experienced it in very different ways, from, loss of jobs, loss of, time with our family, and in extreme cases, loss of life. So I wanted that as a beginning point. And, what says that better than those 6 words? Because I think oftentimes that's how loss happens. It's just, everything's good and then suddenly it isn't. And I had this sense of thinking that, this is a book that I wanted to begin where a fairy tale ends, like what happens after that. And then the whole voyage beyond those first 6 words is really about that trip after you have that loss. But again, I didn't want to stay in that loss. I wanted us to visit it for a little while at the beginning, but I wanted this really to be a book that is about, joy and hope and the promise of new beginnings. And it's, people will laugh when I first tell them what the book's about, and they're going like, so this book that has all these murders and, people dying, you're saying it's a joyful book? But I hope in my heart that when people reach the end of the book and read those last words, that's what they're going to be feeling. So very much in contrast to what I want them to feel at the beginning of the book.
Yeah, and the first, I can't remember, chapter or two, when Jake's in his cold, and it's actually quite, I've heard you read it, it's quite light, or it's funny, until it isn't. So it also gives those 6 lines or 6 words a lot of meaning.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. And those were difficult sections of the book to write, because as you heard it in your case, and as hopefully people read it, that is my intent. I want to, start off fairly dark, take you through a dark time, but during that darkness, keep on reminding the reader that, there is still humor in the world. There's still, some lightheartedness. But at least at the beginning, I want to then take them right back into the depths of what that darkness is. Then I stay there for a little while, and then we start beginning that trajectory upwards.
Part of that trajectory is probably the introduction of Baz. It's just an enjoyable character to be. More than two-dimensional, though. There's a sense of loyalty to her. There's a lot. She's a very complex character, but she's an excellent sidekick. And I hope you don't mind. I just wanted to read a little bit of it because it's also extremely Canadiana. There's a Canadiana, like you call it very Saskatchewan, but I feel it's very Canadian. And if you were in that category, I think you would have been a sure win. Because all I was reading it just feels like Canada. And I'm not going to read a lot, but it's
good. I look forward to this.
This is Baz, sort of their first, Baz and Jake driving into Beautiful in their first impressions. So Baz is speaking. Baz fingered the gold at her neck and muttered, "Beautiful, not exactly the first name that comes to mind." "This isn't a ghost town," I said. "The streets are plowed." "Excellent observation, Detective Murdoch." It's like, you can't get more Canadian than that.
Thanks, Maureen.
Well, yeah, it's a nice play on like no shit Sherlock.
Yes,
exactly. And to be like a Canadian way of saying it, that I'm going to start saying it. And it doesn't need explanation either. Like, I think most people, even in the States, would know exactly that Canadian reference. So you've created a new Canadianism. But continuing with Baz, she's such a fantastic, I'm going to call her a sidekick. But I was wondering, is she in any way an inspiration to your new character that you're writing about, Mary Bell, that you're debuting in Living Sky?
Ah, good for you. Well, first of all, thanks for that reading. I love being read to, especially from my own books. I like it. Yeah, she really is a bridge character, where I don't know if you read any of my Russell Quant books, which was my first series. And in there's a character named Serena Orion Smith. And in this new book that's coming out this June, Living Sky, my main character is a transgender female detective. Baz is right in the middle of those two characters. Serena in the Russell Quant books was a larger than life character. Also, I think very complex. She did things that sometimes you questioned her motives, but you never doubted that she was entirely on Russell's side and would do anything for him. And she was based, you asked earlier about, basing a place or characters on real things. And she was actually based on a woman that I knew very well, who, even at 80 years old, she could drink me out of the table and just, had this crazy life that sometimes you just thought those things can't be true. And then you find out that they were. That was Serena. Baz is, moving from the Russell Quant books to going to Beautiful is, I think, my beginning of wanting to start investigating a transgender character. And I've written small little pieces with transgender characters, but never a character as big as Baz was in that book. And I I did have a sense of where I wanted to go with my career and what I wanted this next book to be. And Baz was my, I don't want to call her my practice because I think she's perfect the way she is, but she really was me working very hard at trying to get a character written as respectfully and accurately as I could, given a whole life experience that I, haven't lived and don't know. And like Serena with the Russell Pond books, Baz is probably the most popular character in that book compared to the main characters, as Serena was probably more popular than Russell Pond was. So to then, bridge all of that into Living Sky and start writing this book about Mary Bell I was so ready by that point, and I have Baz and Serena to thank for that.
And I know you like to write about underrepresented characters, but another layer to her is her age, because we're not, we're used to reading about characters who are 30, probably on average, and then seeing her so able and confident. Like, the confidence in that woman was amazing. Like, she could walk into a room, which would probably make me scared, and just engage people and talk to them, and she'd surprise you. She surprised you a few times too. So I'm hoping, because you're not writing about Baz anymore, that Mary Bell's got some of those characteristics too. I'm assuming, or actually I know, you're staying in Saskatchewan?
Yes. What I am doing differently, though, is, as you mentioned, I do like writing. I mean, not like, my purpose as a writer is to write about underrepresented people and places. That's my why. And this is, the upcoming book is going to be my 13th, and I think it's 9 out of the 13th are set somehow in Saskatchewan. And I decided that I did want to stay in Saskatchewan for this next book, but I wanted to do something different, in that it's the first time that I'm writing about a purely fictional city in Saskatchewan, whereas before I've tended to base my books in Saskatoon, which is my real home city. The town of Beautiful was presented as a fictional town, but it's the real town of Prudhoe in many ways. This is really, it was kind of exciting to me doing this, Eric, because there's a bit of a restriction put on a writer when you're writing about a real place. Like, you've got to watch yourself a little bit, and especially when you live in the city that you're writing about. And the couple of quick stories. The one is, I think it was the very first book that I wrote, and I wrote a little section about this little lake community that's just outside of Saskatoon. And for the purposes of the story, I wanted to make it, not the greatest place in the world. And I think I might have described it something like a mosquito-infested bog or something. Well, somebody who loves that lake dearly and, goes there every summer was quite offended. And I did, and, they were an early reader, and I did end up taking it out, because I just thought, oh my gosh, I have to be careful about this. So to write Living Sky, it's this whole world creating that I haven't been able to do before. I know that people who live in Saskatchewan will know that this is still a thinly veiled Saskatoon, but it allows me to play with things and play with politics and play with economics and sociological stuff without offending anyone, without alarming anyone. And I also get to play a little bit with Easter eggs. So people who know Saskatoon very well will read certain things in that book and go like, oh, I know exactly what that's referencing. So it's fun for me. And it's great at this point in my career to still find ways to kind of stretch my artistic muscles and do something different.
Well, we've hinted on it a few times, but you do a lot for your community. And I know you've been associated with many different, charities and associations in your community in Saskatoon. Is there any project that's really near and dear to your heart?
Yes, I mean, there's several. I mean, probably one of the biggest which I worked with for almost 20 years, was an organization called fYrefly. And it's an organization that actually my husband and I brought to Saskatchewan. And it's a life skills retreat for LGBTQ youth. So even though it's called Camp fYrefly, it's really not a camp at all. Like, we would basically bring in, 30, 40 kids, put them in sort of a version of a campus in Saskatoon or Regina, and bring in facilitators from every walk of life, and just really try and either teach or show or model to these youth just that they're perfect the way they are, that they're not alone. And here are some tools to not only help yourself, but to, when the camp is over, go back to your communities and pass it on to other youth. Doing something like this in Saskatchewan, I thought, was just so important, because unlike many places in Canada, we are really spread apart, and we have a lot of small little towns, like, beautiful. and so oftentimes it wasn't the youth that came from our bigger cities, because a lot of them had support structures already, but it was the kids coming from small towns and villages who, until they came to the camp, really felt they were alone in the world. And the transformation, Eric, from day one to the day they left, it was miraculous to see. And I don't think I'm overstating it by saying that I think we saved lives. And it was a very important thing to do. We always had medical and mental health and spiritual professionals on campus the entire time, and they were very well used, because I think when you suddenly give a youth this different version of the world that they thought they knew and were disappointed in that something else was possible, wonderful things happen, but serious things happen too. So Camp fYrefly was certainly one of them. Right now, I am involved. I'm the chair of a committee with the University of Saskatchewan, which is called the Alumni Achievement Awards. And it's one of the best volunteer pursuits I've ever had, and we're actually right in the process of it right now. The nomination packages are coming in. And it's basically, imagine your alma mater, you get to find out what these people are doing, years, sometimes decades later. And there are people from, my university around the world doing absolutely amazing things. So we get to read about them and award them and give them recognition. And that's I think, I really like the idea of finding people who otherwise you don't really hear a lot about, but they're doing astounding things. And then just for one evening, making them feel like they're the most valued people on earth. So I really get a lot of reward by doing things like that.
Yeah, those are two excellent organizations to be part of. I've been coaching basketball for almost 10 years, and every once in a while you run into a kid who was a kid who's now a young man. Does that ever happen to you walking through Saskatchewan and they're like, Anthony?
Yes, absolutely. And with Camp fYrefly, it's almost more often it's the parents of the kid that they will come up to me. And the one that I can barely even talk about it. The one set of parents that came up and just said, like, you gave us our kid back. And wow. So it's just doing so little. Like, we did little more than just raise some money and bring smart people together to organize it, but with so little effort you could do such amazing and important things. When I'm launching my book in a few weeks in Saskatoon, I don't know if you know, but the Sask Arts, which is the Saskatchewan Arts Board in our province, is 75 years old, and they've created a program where they asked established artists in the province, including myself, to nominate someone that we thought was kind of emerging and is going to make the future of arts exciting. And just through my niece, who's a teacher in school, years ago, she told me about this young fellow who, has gone through the most hair-raising challenges in his life, more than I'm sure you or I will ever know. but he found therapy from writing and drawing comics. And he came up to my niece and said, "Do you know a publisher?" And she said, "No." And he said, "Okay, fine." And he went back, and in the back of his Captain Underpants book, he found an ad for a publisher and decided to write this publisher a letter. And Amy showed me a copy of this letter, and he talked about, that he's a comic book illustrator. He wants them to publish them. And if they do, he will donate 100% of the profits to charity. And that just really caught my heart, that this little kid who had nothing, that's what his dream was. So move ahead several years, at my book launch, he was the successful nominee for my nomination. So he's going to get a $750 grant from the Arts Board, and we're going to present that to him at my book launch. So stuff like that is just so powerful. And again, so little effort, but it can change people's lives. And I think we all have that in us to do that if we pay attention to who's out there. Because someone like Kane is someone that I think a lot of people would just discount, because he's rough and tough, and he's not the best kid in school, but he's got heart. And it's kids like that really give me hope for the future of the Canadian literary landscape.
Yeah, me too now. Thank you. Getting back to you a little bit. You have a couple of events.
That's boring stuff.
No, you're doing a queer noir in Toronto. You can tell us a bit about that, but also I guess you're going on a little bit of a book tour.
Yes. Yeah. So June 1st, I'm going to be in Toronto, and it's I don't know if everyone's heard of Noir in the Bar. And so what the organizers in Toronto have done is they've kind of made their version of it, because June is Pride Month. So they've called it Queer Noir. And there are, I think, 7 of us authors that are going to be at the venue that night, and we're going to be reading from our books. So that's where my star is going to be. And then I've got dates in Edmonton, Calgary, and Saskatoon. So yeah, we'll be doing a little bit of traveling around with the books.
It's exciting.
Yeah.
Before then, I'm going to wish you the best of luck for May 25th. I guess it's going to put you in a good or bad mood right before your book launch.
Well, yes, talk about bad timing, Eric.
Hopefully it puts you in a good mood. And you'll have something to say at your book launch.
Yeah, or else people, why is he crying up there?
Well, I enjoyed going to Beautiful. I got to buy it from you in person, and it was nice meeting you in person. And this is, I think, the longest we've ever chatted, so I'm very happy to have done it. And hopefully we're going to chat again.
Yes.
So to everyone else watching out there, thank you so much.
Thanks, Eric.